Hello everyone, I am Sammy, your devoted manga otaku, and welcome to my manga space. This is part 2 of 3 of my manga collection, and in this video I'll be touring my second bookcase. If you missed part 1, I'll leave a card on the screen and link in the description. And with that, I invite you to grab a coffee or other beverage of your choice, and let's talk manga. Now, on the tippy top of my second bookshelf, we have volumes 1 through 14 of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, the 3-in-1 editions by Akira Toriyama. I really love how these look on the shelf. The spines look so freaking cool. Most people into anime and manga know or have at least heard of Dragon Ball, but if you are unaware, this is an insanely popular shonen series following the adventures of an extraordinarily powerful boy named Goku. He is training to become the strongest fighter in the world while also searching for the Dragon Balls, which grant the owner one wish when combined. I haven't read this series yet, but my husband has, and he loved them. Despite not reading the manga though, I know and understand most of the story when it comes to Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. I'm a huge fan of the DBZ Abridged series, and my husband and I have watched Super together as well. I will definitely be reading these once I have a little extra time. Right next to Dragon Ball, I have the spin-off gag manga, Dragon Ball: The Time I Got Reincarnated as Yamcha by Dragon Garo Lee. This is a fan-made isekai story following an ordinary Dragon Ball fan who dies and is reincarnated as Yamcha. For those that don't know Dragon Ball, Yamcha is everyone's favorite punching bag. I haven't read this yet, but my husband really enjoyed it. He thought it was entertaining and recommends it to fans of the Dragon Ball franchise. Also in this collection, I have the full color Dragon Ball Z editions by Akira Toriyama. I'm kind of annoyed that only the Seinen and Frieza arcs were ever published in English, especially since the entire Dragon Ball and DBZ series were released in Japan in these beautiful full color editions. And then, starting with this first shelf, we have volumes 1 through 9 of Everyone's Getting Married by Izumi Miyazono. This Josei manga centers around a romance between a successful career woman with an old-fashioned dream of becoming a housewife and a popular newscaster who despises marriage. I really enjoyed this when I last read it, but I haven't read it in years and I've heard some mixed reviews since then, so hopefully I can reread this soon and see how well it's aged. Up next is a manga I reread earlier last year, and that's Backstage Prince, which is a 2-volume series by Kaneko Sakura Koji. Basically, this is a short story romance between 2 high schoolers. One is a kabuki actor and the other becomes his assistant. This manga wasn't anything special. The storyline was very basic. I thought the characters were flat, and I felt like it tried to do too much. If this manga had been a 4-volume series, I feel like things could have been fleshed out so much better, but yeah, I don't recommend you buy this one. And then we have volumes 1 through 8 of the Josei series, Butterflies, Flowers by Yuki Yoshihara. This rom-com story follows a woman whose family used to be very wealthy, but ended up going bankrupt, and after her starting a new job, she discovers that her boss used to be one of her family's faithful servants. It's been a long time since I read this last, but I remember it being quite funny and entertaining. It's another series that I have to reread at some point and review for my channel. Now, this next manga is one that I don't think has aged well, and that's volumes 1 through 10 of Happy Marriage by Maki and Joji. This is a romance story about a woman who falls in love after being forced into an arranged marriage with someone she hates because her father is in a huge amount of debt. I remember liking this when I read it ages ago, but within the last year, I read some of Injoji Sensei's other works and I wasn't impressed at all. I feel like my tastes in manga have changed quite a bit in the last 5 years, so I'm definitely curious what my thoughts will be after revisiting this series. And then we have volumes 1 through 7 of An Incurable Case of Love by Maki and Joji. And this is one of the manga from Injoji Sensei that I didn't really care for. This is a Josei series following a nurse who chose her profession in order to get close to a doctor, but it turns out that he's really mean and grumpy and he wants nothing to do with her. This had a lot of potential. I liked the thought of a Josei series in a hospital environment, but it quickly turned into a very predictable and tropey office romance. I might look into unhauling this series in the future. Another Injoji Sensei series that missed the mark for me is the short series SP Baby, which follows a young woman who's being hired as a personal bodyguard for the Prime Minister's nephew. This felt super rushed and has a lot of instances of sexual harassment that made me really dislike the male lead. I'll probably be unhauling these books at some point as well. And the last series on this shelf is volumes 1 through 9 of the Josei manga, Stepping on Roses by Rinko Ueda. This series is set in the Meiji period and follows a young woman who is struggling to take care of orphan children. Desperate for help, she agrees to marry a wealthy man who promises to pay for anything she needs. I've reread this series a couple times over the years. It's a little dramatic and problematic, but I remember it being a lot of fun. Also, I really like the artwork. I feel like it stands out compared to other shoujo manga. Moving to the next shelf, we have volumes 1 through 5 of the omnibus editions of After the Rain by Jun Meizuki. This is a beautiful coming-of-age tale about two people who've lost something integral to themselves, and they end up helping each other in unexpected ways due to this connection that they share. People mistake this for a taboo age gap romance, but it's actually a very bittersweet and complex story that shares meaningful messages and experiences. The art is gorgeous, the characters are authentic and realistic. I urge you to check this out if you haven't. It's one of my favorite seinen manga series. Up next is volumes 1 through 8 of the disturbing psychological horror Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi. I'm not getting into the details of the series because it's best to enter this story blind, but at its core, the narrative revolves around the relationship between an overprotective mother and her son. This is a terrifying and extremely addictive series, and I recommend it to anyone that enjoys horror. Also, Oshimi Sensei is a fantastic artist. His illustrations and facial expressions are phenomenal. And then we have volumes 1 through 8 of the seinen manga, My Boy by Hitomi Takano. This is a wildly successful series in Japan and follows a relationship between a woman who's being abused by her partner and a young boy who's being neglected by his family. This series is complete at 9 volumes, and I plan on reading this once the final volume is released. I'm really excited because I've only ever heard really great things about this series. And beside My Boy, we have volumes 1 through 3 of A School Frozen in Time, story by Mizuki Tsujimura and art by Naoshi Arakawa. I believe this story follows a group of friends who become trapped inside a school with the clocks all frozen at the exact time a student committed suicide months earlier. There's a mystery aspect to this series, so I've kept myself in the dark on purpose, and I'm just waiting for the final volume before reading it. Up next is volumes 1 through 3 of The Golden Sheep by Kaori Ozaki, which is a slice-of-life drama following a group of childhood friends who reconnect as teenagers. I know I'm in the minority here, but I wasn't a fan of this manga. I feel like this series doesn't take abuse seriously and promotes undeserving forgiveness and redemption. It just wasn't long enough to appropriately explore its heavy themes, And it's a shame because it had so much potential. I really liked the first volume. I will most likely be unhauling this in the future. And then we have another manga by Kaori Ozaki, and that's the one-shot story, The God's Lie. I've heard really good things about this, but I have no idea what it's about, and it's not very high on my TBR. After reading The Golden Sheep, I just don't have a lot of drive to read this at the moment. I do admit though, Ozaki Sensei is a great artist, and I do love their artwork. And then we have Utsubora, The Story of a Novelist by Asumiko Nakamura, which is another one-shot story. And this one follows an up-and-coming novelist who dies mysteriously, and people close to her feel like there is something more sinister involved. I haven't read this yet. It's still in the plastic, but it sounds really interesting, and I enjoy a good mystery. I'm hoping I can get to this one soon. Up next, we have the one-shot manga, A Girl on the Shore by Inio Asano. Asano Sensei is a fairly popular mangaka, with their most notable works being Goodnight Poon Poon and Solanin, but from what I've heard, this title isn't as celebrated. I don't know much about the plot apart from it exploring mature and depressing topics, and I'm holding off reading it until I'm in the right mood since it's supposed to be a pretty bleak book. And then we have volumes 1 through 5 of the ongoing series Go With the Clouds, North by Northwest by Aki Airi. This has a very unique sounding premise. It's set in Iceland and follows a teenage boy who uses his supernatural power of being able to talk to machinery to try and find his missing brother. I love the aesthetic of these volumes. They are very beautiful and whimsical, and since hauling this series on my channel, I've had a few people reach out and say that they really enjoyed this series. It isn't super high on my TBR, to be honest though, since the 6th volume isn't out until 2023, but I think it'll be a really good read. And hiding in the corner here, we have another shonen series. I actually don't have very many of these in my collection, but this is volumes 1 through 3 of Mashle, Magic and Muscles by Hajime Komoto. I haven't read this yet, but I know it follows a boy who joins a magic academy despite his inability to use magic, and to compensate, he solely relies on his strength and muscles. Think One Punch Man meets Harry Potter. I've had a couple people from the community tell me that they really enjoyed this manga. Apparently it's super funny and entertaining, so I'm very excited to step out of my comfort zone and give this series a try. And right underneath Mashle, we have volumes 1 through 9 of the omnibus editions of Maid-sama by Hiro Fujiwara. Maid-sama is a shoujo about a high school student council president who secretly works part-time as a waitress in a French maid uniform. And one day, a popular boy from her school discovers her secret and starts taking an interest in her. I bought these omnibuses within the last 5 years. I think I bought them 4 years ago, because I googled best shoujo romances and this series was always mentioned. I'll be honest, I read the first volume and DNF'd it. I thought the art and the dialogue were mediocre. I'm pretty sure this suffers from some translation issues, and the story was way sillier than I thought it'd be. I'm going to give this another shot at some point. Sometimes it takes a couple volumes before a story catches its stride, especially with these older shoujo. If you've read Maid-sama, I'd love to know if you recommend it. And then we have volumes 1 through 3 of QQ Sweeper and its sequel, volumes 1 through 13 of Queen's Quality, both by Kyosuke Motumi. This is a supernatural series with a very unique premise. It follows a family of sweepers, which are people who have the ability to clean the negative energy in people's minds. One day, a mysterious girl named Fumi appears and shows promise as a sweeper, so the family trains her while simultaneously uncovering Fumi's secretive past. I've read QQ Sweeper and 3 volumes of Queen's Quality, and I'm in love with it so far. I love the concept of the story. I love that it touches on a bunch of dark subjects, but keeps it light by being funny. The character development is great so far, and I'm super invested in the romance. It's very lovey-dovey and heartwarming. If you like romances that are woven into unique storylines and steer clear of basic characters, then you might enjoy this one. And then we have Love Me, Love Me Not, which is a 12-volume manga series by Io Sakisaka. Now, I haven't read this shoujo romance yet, but I know it follows 2 girls. One's a realist and one's an idealist, and the manga chronicles their friendship and love life experiences. I don't know what to expect with this series. I see a lot of people comparing it to Sakisaka Sensei's other works like Aoharu Ride and Strobe Edge, and they complain that it's not as good. Now, I haven't read those other manga, so I don't really have any expectations going into this. I am planning on reading this series soon though, and I'm really looking forward to it because I've been collecting this for over a year now. The last manga on this shelf is volumes 1 through 3 of the Josei series, Yakuza Lover by Nozomi Mino. The story centers around a smutty and dangerous romance between a college student and a Yakuza boss. This is very much a guilty pleasure read. Now, I was a little disappointed with volume 3. I felt like there wasn't enough story progression and character development. But I am going to purchase the next volume. I did hear that it improves. And then we have volumes 1 through 14 of Tramps Like Us by Yayoi Ogawa. This is my favorite manga series. It's the creme de la creme of my collection, and it's a literal Josei masterpiece in my opinion. It's a quirky romance centering on the complicated and unconventional relationship between Sumire and her pet, Momo. Sumire is a beautiful, young, successful, career-oriented woman who becomes increasingly frustrated and lonesome because people are intimidated by her. One night, Sumire stumbles upon a young man sleeping in a cardboard box, and she ends up feeding him while jokingly stating that he can stay in her apartment full time if he agrees to be her human pet. And to her surprise, the man accepts her offer. Now, what's unique about this story is that Sumire treats Momo like a pet. Their relationship isn't sexual. She doesn't take advantage of Momo or expect anything from him. She bathes, feeds, and even strokes his hair as if he were a real pet. What she needs from Momo is the companionship, someone she can be honest and vulnerable with. I've probably read this series at least 10 times. It's an extremely wonderful, non-cliched, underrated, and underappreciated manga featuring realistic and relatable characters who evolve and grow throughout the story. The storytelling is magnificent, the romance is adorable, and the relationship dynamics are really interesting. Also, I love Ogawa Sensei's art style. She's super talented and has a unique flair with her drawings and characters. I really wish it was easier for people to get their hands on this, but it's an older series and has been out of print for years. However, you can find it digitally through Kodansha under its new title, You Are My Pet. If you find a copy of this series, make sure you check it out. It's worth it, I promise. Lastly, Kodansha, just so you know, if you ever reprint this series, I will buy it, and I will urge other people to buy it. So maybe print some omnibuses or something. That'd be pretty cool. And on the other side of the shelf, we have volumes 1 through 10 of Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon and volume 1 of Codename Sailor V, the Eternal editions, all by the talented Naoko Takeuchi. I think pretty much everyone knows the basic premise of Sailor Moon. A teenage girl who learns she is a legendary guardian known as Sailor Moon has to discover and unite the Sailor Senshi in order to defend Earth from evil. I've just barely started my Sailor Moon journey. I've read volume 1 of Sailor Moon and the first volume of Codename Sailor V, and both were fantastic. I'll add that these volumes are also gorgeous and totally worth the higher price tag. They have fully colored pages sprinkled throughout each volume, and it's printed on high quality glossy paper, very pretty and a must-have for Sailor Moon fans and collectors. And below Sailor Moon, we have a shelf that houses some of my favorite Josei and Shoujo titles, starting with volumes 1 through 9 of Perfect World by Rai Aruga. Perfect World is a Josei series that chronicles the triumphs and hardships of a relationship between a disabled man who uses a wheelchair and a non-disabled woman. I've read up to volume 8 of this romance and it's pretty good. I've given it a solid 4 stars thus far. I recently heard that volume 9 is the true ending of the series and volumes 10 through 12 are just a collection of side stories. I'm actually really excited to hear that because the romance in this series dragged for me a little, so I can't wait to see some big steps in the next couple installments. Up next, we have volumes 1 through 9 of Living Room Matsunaga-san by Keiko Iwashita, which is a series that quickly climbed the ranks and is currently in my top 5 favorite manga of all time. I'm obsessed with this shoujo and talk about it quite a bit on my channel, so I'm not going to get into too much detail here, but essentially it's an age gap romance between a high school girl named Miko and her grumpy roommate Jun Matsunaga. The narrative and the characters are adorable. It's lighthearted and fluffy, while featuring modern illustrations and designs. Jun is the cutest, sweetest, and hottest manga boy ever. Sure, he's hot-headed, but he's also super genuine and very kind. I love him so much. Even if you aren't a fan of age gaps, I'd still recommend you give this a chance. Both the storyline and the characters are well written and realistic. It's just a very enjoyable series, and I don't think you'll regret picking it up. And then we have volumes 1 through 5 of the Josei series Wotaku, Life is Hard for an Otaku by Fujita, and these are the omnibus editions. I read volumes 1 and 2 a few years ago when they first came out, but I stopped because there was a couple year gap between volumes 2 and 3. I don't remember too much about the narrative, but I recall this being an office romance centering around a group of young professionals that are all otaku. Also, I remember adoring the characters because they share many of the same interests and hobbies as my husband and I. Also, I really like the art style. I think it's well drawn and pretty. The final volume releases this summer, and I look forward to binging this once I have the whole series. This next series recently wrapped up, and that's Sweat and Soap, which is an 11-volume manga series by Kentetsu Yamada. This workplace comedy follows the relationship between a shy, quiet woman named Asako, who has low self-esteem and perspiration problems, and a soap developer named Kotaro, who has a keen sense of smell and obsession with Asako's scent. What starts off as a strange romance quickly develops into a wholesome relationship built on love, trust, and communication. I feel like this manga is perfect for people who don't like conventional romances and enjoy unique stories that aren't too cliche. If you're interested in mature, realistic romances with very little drama, likable characters, smutty moments, and hilarious scenarios, then you should give this one a try. And last on this shelf, we have volumes 1 through 11 of Kiss Me at the Stroke of Midnight by Rin Mikimoto. This is a Cinderella-esque story about a hardworking honor student named Hanana who yearns for a fairy tale romance. Under unusual circumstances, Hanana encounters the popular actor Kaede, but despite his princely image, Hanana discovers that his true personality is a little quirkier than she anticipated. I truly adore this series. Hanana and Kaede are the most precious couple ever, and I love how their relationship progresses throughout the story. I'm planning on rereading this series in preparation for the last volume. It's taken almost a year for the finale to release, and I need to familiarize myself with the story again. Definitely check this one out if you like funny shoujo that put a unique spin on the genre. On the next shelf, we have volumes 1 through 3 of the historical romance Golden Japanesque, a splendid Yokohama romance by Kaho Miyasaka. This shoujo series is set in the Meiji era and centers around the relationship between a wealthy boy and a servant girl who's ashamed for having golden hair and blue eyes. What drew me to this series in the first place was the illustrations. I think they look beautiful and I love all the detail work. If I have time, I'm going to try and read these books this month. And then we have volumes 1 through 5 of Kaiju Girl Karamelisse by Spica Aoki. I don't know very much about this series, but I think it's about a girl who turns into a kaiju when she's under emotional pressure. This sounds super weird and over the top, but it's a very unique story compared to anything else in my collection, and I'm looking forward to reading it. Just the thought of a cute girl turning into a giant kaiju monster sounds entertaining. Also, I really love the artwork. It's so sweet and so sparkly. Moving on, we have volumes 1 through 14 of the shoujo series Horimiya, written by Hiro and illustrated by Daisuke Hagiwara. I haven't read this series in a long time. I think I dropped off around the 10th volume, but it's basically about two high school students that live different lives outside of school, and they accidentally discover each other's secret double life, which drives them closer together. I recall this being quite funny and cute, and I remember really liking the male lead, but I dropped this manga because I got bored and I just kept on collecting them so that I could binge it at some point. I'm currently missing the 15th volume. It's impossible to find at the moment, and the 16th volume is the finale, so I'll be giving this series a full read through once it's completed. This next one-shot debuted fairly recently, and that's Boy Meets Maria by Peyo. I don't know too much about this other than its characters struggle with identity issues and it touches on some heavy stuff. I'm not sure if this has a definite ending or not. I was sad to hear that Peyo Sensei passed away in 2020, so there won't be a sequel to this, but it could just be a one-shot. I'm not sure. The narrative sounds dark and emotional, and the art style is very pretty. Hopefully I can read this soon. Up next, we have the coming-of-age story I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, and it's written by Yoro Sumino and illustrated by Izumi Kirihara. This deeply moving story follows an introverted boy who finds his classmate's diary and discovers her biggest secret: she is suffering from a terminal pancreatic disease. It's a very bittersweet and impactful story about love and friendship. After reading this last year, I gave the book 5 stars. It's definitely worth checking out, especially if you need a good cry. And then we have another manga by Yoro Sumino and Izumi Kirihara, and that's the one-shot story I Had That Same Dream Again. After reviewing I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, I had some people recommend this book to me in my comment section, saying that it was just as good, if not better, than I Want to Eat Your Pancreas. I have no clue what it's about, but I imagine it's another emotional story, and I look forward to checking it out. And then we have the I Hear the Sunspot collection by Yuki Fumino. The series starts with I Hear the Sunspot, then Theory of Happiness, and lastly, volumes 1 through 3 of Limit. This is a slice of life romance between two boys in college. One has a hearing disability and keeps to himself, while the other is very outgoing and cheerful. I haven't read this yet, but I've heard that it's a very touching and heartwarming story about these boys developing a friendship that eventually evolves into a romance. The art is super cute and the premise sounds very sweet. I'm hoping I can get to this one soon. This next series is technically my husband's, and that's Sword Art Online, Aincrad, and Fairy Dance, both written by Riki Kawahara and illustrated by Tamako Nakamura. I know the anime was popular when it came out, but if you aren't aware, this is a science fantasy story following human players whose minds have been imprisoned in a virtual reality game called Sword Art Online. If your health bar reaches 0, you die, and the only way to escape is to beat the game. Honestly, I recommend that you just watch the anime. I haven't read the manga, but the anime is so good. My hubby and I binged it over 3 days while moving into our new house. We were very sleep deprived, but it was worth it. And the last series on this shelf is volumes 1 through 11 of The Devil Does Exist by Mitsuba Takanashi. This is a step-sibling romance, and it's one of my rarer series. It's fairly hard to come by. I really love the older art style. It reminds me of Nana by Ayazawa, and although it's been a while since I read it, I really love this series. I'll have to reread it at some point so I can talk about it in one of my wrap-ups. And then we have volumes 1 through 4 of The Flowers of Evil by Shuzo Oshimi. First off, I want to say that I really dislike that these volumes are a different size compared to all the other vertical publications. They are taller than all my other vertical titles, and it's annoying. As for the story though, this manga follows a boy who's being blackmailed by a classmate because she saw him steal someone's gym clothes. I really want to read this series this year because I've heard nothing but good things, and I expect a lot from this because it is an Oshimi sensei title and he's a genius. Up next is volumes 1 through 15 of The Ancient Magus Bride by Kore Yamazaka. This manga is about a human girl with exceptional magical powers, and she's being purchased at an auction by a powerful magus who wishes for her to become his apprentice and then eventually his bride. I really liked this manga in the beginning, but I'm not sure if I'm going to continue with the series. I don't like the second arc at all. There are too many characters and the storyline is moving away from my favorite aspect of this series, which is Elias and Chisei's relationship. I think I've read up to volume 11 or volume 12, so I'll read the rest of what I have before deciding if I want to unhaul it or not. And then up top here, we have volumes 1 and 2 of J.K. Haru is a Sex Worker in Another World, story by Ko Hiratori and art by J.T. Yamada. This isekai manga is adapted from a light novel by the same name and follows a high schooler named Haru who dies tragically with her classmate Chiba, and both are transported to another world. The world is very misogynistic, which forces Haru to work in a brothel in order to survive. I've only read volume 1, but it really surprised me. It's thought-provoking and it's way sadder than I thought it would be. The illustrations in this series are quite graphic, so I can't show you guys a sneak peek of the art. This won't be for everyone, but I do think it's something that's worth checking out. Moving on, we have volumes 1 and 2 of Orange, the complete collection, and the spin-off volume Orange Future, both by Ichiko Takano. This is a heart-wrenching sci-fi romance about a girl who receives a mysterious letter from someone claiming to be her from the future. The letter urges her to watch over a new transfer student in order to save him from a terrible fate. I've read this before, minus Orange Future, and it was a beautifully illustrated and impactful story. It contains heavy and serious topics, but balances them out with lighthearted moments. Orange Future is the same story, but from another character's perspective. Like I said before, I haven't read this yet, but I didn't even know it existed until just last year. I don't know when I'll get to it, but I know I want to reread Orange before diving into the spin-off. And beside Orange, we have volumes 1 through 3 of We Swore to Meet in the Next Life, and That's When Things Got Weird by Hato Hachiya. This isekai romance follows a princess and a knight who are forbidden from being together, so they swear to find each other in another life. However, they didn't account for being reincarnated over 20 years apart. I haven't read this series yet, but I enjoy a good age gap story, and the art is very pretty. I adore the covers. I think they look gorgeous. I look forward to checking this out and letting you guys know my thoughts. And then we have another short story, and this is volumes 1 through 4 of the Seinen series, Our Dreams at Dusk, Anami Tasagore by Aki Kamatani. I am so sorry if I butchered that. This is a coming-of-age drama about a gay teenager who meets other LGBTQ+ people at a discussion lounge after being involuntarily outed. I haven't read this series either, but it has outstanding reviews. A lot of people praise the LGBTQ+ representation and realistic storyline. This is super high on my TBR, and I plan on reading this very soon. This next manga on my shelf was completed recently, and that's volumes 1 through 11 of the dark fantasy The Girl from the Other Side, Shularun by Nagabe. This is a mysterious fairy tale exploring the unique relationship between a young human girl and a twisted beast. I read the first volume of this series years ago, and I enjoyed how it was cute but also haunting and gloomy. My plan is to binge read this series around summertime. I'll probably read it for the Spooky Smart Bitch Readathon in August. And then we have volumes 1 and 2 of Skip and Loafer by Masaki Takamatsu. I don't know much about this series except that it follows a country girl who moves to Tokyo. I've seen a lot of people say good things about this on Instagram, so I'm excited to get into it. But the main reason I bought this series in the very first place is the artwork. I think it looks really charming and cute. I just love the girl's facial expression on the cover. The last series on this bookshelf is the one-shot Yuri story, I Married My Best Friend to Shut Up My Parents by Kodama Naoko. The title of this manga sums up the premise of the book perfectly. I haven't read this yet, but it's short and it sounds very sweet. And yeah, that's it for bookcase number 2. And that was my entire second bookcase. If you're interested in watching the final part of this collection tour, I'll leave a card on the screen and link in the description. If you're interested in watching more videos from me, you can check out my end card where I'll have links to my most recent videos. I hope you all have a manga-nificent day, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!